Torah Tzivalon Moshe is the famous posuk, which the Gemara tells us that when a child begins speaking, the first posuk you teach him is Torah Tzivalon Moshe Morasho Kilas Yaakov. And one said, it's interesting, when the child starts speaking, this is the posuk you teach him. Although the child has no understanding of what the words mean or the significance of the words, nevertheless, this is the first pasuk you teach. Torah Tzivalon Moshe Morasho Kilas Yaakov. The second pasuk you teach is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's the second pasuk. It's a Gemara in two locations. So I asked the question. Seemingly we know that the fundamental of everything is Kabbalah Somal Shemayim, which is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So the first pasuk you should teach a child is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then Torah Tzivalon Moshe Morasho Kilas Yaakov. But yet the Gemara says no. The order is first Torah Tzivalon Moshe Morasho Kilas Yaakov, then Shema. The question is why. So there's an interesting Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Rav Chaim Volozhiner tells us, he has a commentary on Pirkei Avos. It's called Ruach Chaim. The Mishnah says in the first parak, Al Shloshet Dvarim Omed Omed. The world stands on three principles: Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasodim. We know that each one of the principles correspond to the Avos HaKadoshim. Avram was Gemilas Chasodim, Yitzchak was Avodah, and Yaakov was Torah. Yaakov Yishtam Yoshev Ohalim. He's the man, the tenth of the Torah. So if that's the case, Rabbi Yehuda Anosi, when he authored the Mishnah, the order should have been Al Shlosh Torah Olam Omed, Gemilas Chasodim, Avodah, Torah. So why is the order first Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasodim? That's Rav Chaim Volozhiner's question, the Ruach Chaim. So he explains that before Matan Torah, what was considered Gemilas Chesed? The person would come to you and say, I'd like to borrow money. And the lender would say, not a problem, but it's going to cost you interest. That was Gemilas Chasodim. What about if the lender says, I'm not interested in taking interest, but the borrower insists to pay interest? It's definitely Gemilas Chasodim. The lender was willing to give the money without receiving any fee, and the borrower insisted. That's Gemilas Chasodim. That's pre-Sinai. What about post-Sinai? We learned Nezer Neshech that even if the borrower insists to pay the interest, and it's not contingent on the interest alone, if the lender takes that money, he's in violation of ribis, both the borrower and the lender. And a person who does this on a regular basis, the Gemara tells us, he's not going to be resurrected. That's how serious the violation of ribis is, taking interest. That's pre-Sinai. Pre-Sinai, it's the ultimate level of Gemilas Chasodim. Post-Sinai, Ein Avronina L'Tchias HaMesim. His dust will not awaken to T'chias HaMesim. Avodah. Avodah is bringing korbanos, sacrifices. Pre-Sinai, anybody who wanted to bring a korban to Hashem, he builds an altar wherever he is. A Mizbeach brings the korban. Post-Sinai, we have the Mishkan, we have the Beis HaMikdash. What is it considered? It's called Shchutei Chutz. You bring a korban outside Beis HaMikdash, one's liable for koris. If one sacrifices, one's liable for koris. So pre-Sinai, this is avodah, the ultimate level of avodah. Post-Sinai, what is it? It's koris. Person, he terminates his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if he does such a thing. So what's the difference? The difference is pre-Sinai, post-Sinai. What's post-Sinai? That's Torah. Before we even start speaking, you have to know what the Torah says. First, let's understand what the Torah says. What's Gemilas Chesed? The Torah is the one who determines what Gemilas Chesed is, what it's not. Alone, without ribis, is Gemilas Chesed. With ribis, you don't merit, one doesn't merit resurrection. Avodah, pre-Sinai, you build a boma, you build a mizbeach on your roof in your backyard. It's avodah. Post-Sinai, koris. So we see that post-Sinai, everything is predicated on Torah. You have to know what the Torah says. Therefore, Omed, Torah Avod Gemilas Chasodim. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. If that's the first pasuk you teach a child, the question is, what does that mean? What about if Shituf, Christianity, Lahavdil? For a Jew, Christianity, according to most Rishonim, is what? A non-Jew, that's not called idolatry. He's not violating one of Hashem mitzvah. For a Jew, it's the Harag Val Yavar. That's Avodah Zorah. So pre-Sinai, why? Because that's what the Torah dictates. Torah dictates, Atem Kruyim Odom, for you it's idolatry. You have to give your life. For the non-Jew, it's not. Or there are many things. That pre-Sinai is one thing, post-Sinai is something else. So everything is what? So if you teach the child, the first post teaching, Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does that mean? First, you have to have Torah. First, you teach the child Torah. That's the first thing you teach him. After you teach him that, then we talk about Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's why the order specifically for Torah, Tziv Lanu Moshe, and then Shema Yisrael. That's how I answered the question. Now, let's understand. If the child has no understanding what those words even mean, the child's just first brain development, he's able to articulate words. He's just mimicking words. He has no idea what it is. How do we understand? What's the value of teaching the child? The first words that he's able to articulate or pronounce should be these words, these psukim, these two psukim. What's the value? Now, the Gemara tells us in Eruvin that Bruria, the wife of Rebeir, was walking by someone learning in the Beis Medrash, and Bruria was the daughter of Rab Hananya ben Trajum, one of the Arugi Malchus. And she sees he's learning without verbalizing the words. It's not articulating the words. So the Gemara says, Botabo, meaning she like scolded him. Literally means she kicked him, says, you're wasting your time. Why? Because it says in the Pasuk, Chaim hi lemotzaim. The Torah only brings Chaim lemotzaim misha motzi bepeh. If you articulate it, the Torah has the impact on you. If you don't verbalize it, articulate it, doesn't have that effect on you. So you have to articulate it. Now, so that's Chaim hi lemotzaim misha motzi bepeh. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu endowed the human being, the Torah tells us when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam Rishon, it says, Vayiper ba'apav nishmas kaim. God blew into his nostrils a soul of life. And the Chavetz Chaim brings this many times. The Targum Ukla says over there, what happened? It says, Vayila nefesh chayo. He became a nefesh chayo. Literally means a living species. The Targum says, nefesh ruach memalo. He became a speaking species. That as a result of the neshama being blown into him through his nostrils, so the koach hadibur, the ability to speak, comes from what? Comes from the neshama. It's a spiritual faculty. It's a derivative of the neshama. That's what speech is. Now, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu endow the human being to speak? What is the objective of the Bria? Torah. Bereshis bara Elokim es Shemai v'Soretz b'shvul Torah shenikus Bereshis. So if Torah itself needs articulation, it needs verbalization. If that's the case, the species known as the human being has to be able to speak. Initially, who is Adam? Atem Kruyim Adam. That was post-chet of Eitz Hadas. Pre-chet of Eitz Hadas, Adam Rishon was the Adam. So Adam, and all humanity would have been Adam. Adam was meant to speak. Why? Because speech was an expression of Torah. But once Adam became disenfranchised as a result of Eitz Hadas, so now Atem Kriyim Adam. Klal Yisrael, now our classification is Adam. We being Adam and we being Bereshis Bara B'Shul Torah Shenikus Bereshis. Now we have the Torah. We have to have the ability to articulate. So speech is essential for Limud Torah. For the Torah, to address the objective of creation. Now, the child has no understanding of what he's saying, but the brain development, the beginning, the ability to speak, everything is based on sanctification, consecration, to be magdishit. The koyach hadibur, which is specifically was endowed upon the human being for Torah. You have to endow that endowment You have to establish it from its very inception in what? In Kedusha. How do you establish a Kedusha? That when the brain reaches a level of development that it's able to articulate the power of speech, that's the word those are the psukim you teach the child. First, Torah Tziv Lo Moshe Yaakov, and then you teach the child Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. It has nothing to do with understanding. It has to do with the ability to speak in the brain. The brain already is consecrated. That faculty of speech already, it's founded on what? It's founded on Torah itself. Therefore, these are the first two psukim you teach a child. First, Torah Tziv Lo Moshe Yaakov, and then the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Now, Ernie, when he went to day school in Detroit, in those days he used to teach diktuk. I also, when I was in elementary school, we learned diktuk. We learned ivris. We learned not ivrit, ivris. So those days, you have different poalim. You have kal, hispoil. You have different ways of expressing things. Now, Torah Tziv Lo Moshe Morosho, it should say Yerushas Kilas Yaakov. Yerusha is an inheritance. What's the difference between Morosho and Yerusha? That's what Rabbeinu Bachya addresses, or Rabbeinu Bachaya. What's the difference between Morosho and Yerusha? So he explains, if a person receives inheritance, why does he receive an inheritance? Because he's the heir of the person who passed away. Naturally, it passes from the deceased to the heir. That's what a Yerusha is. That's inheritance. What happens if the person inherits the inheritance he chooses to destroy and to squander it? The inheritance, although he himself has an heir, a potential heir, the heir may be upset that his parent is destroying it, but that's the prerogative of the parent. Because Yerusha inheritance means it fully belongs to the one who inherits. He has the right to do whatever he wants to do with that inheritance. It may be irresponsible, but he has that right. What about if you only receive something only to pass it on? It's given to you on the precondition you have to preserve it and guarantee that it's perpetuated. Then you have no right to destroy it. Which is Morosha. The grammatical context of Morosha is it was given to you to pass on, lohorish, to pass it on. And that's what he says. That is the responsibility of every Jew. When we have Torah, we have to guarantee the eternity of Torah to our best ability, that the next generation or as many generations into the future have the Torah, and that's the responsibility of every generation to guarantee the future, the next generation. That's Rabbeinu Bachaya, Rabbeinu Bachya. I mean, there's a Rabbeinu Simcha in Pashas Kedoshim. Now, what is the basis for the Torah being divine? The authenticity of Torah being the Dvar Hashem. How do we know it's Dvar Hashem? So if you begin the beginning of Pirkei Avos, Moshe Kibbutz Torah B'Sinai, sorry, Yeshua, Lenavim, things that came, there was an order of transmission. It's called Mesorah. The reason why we know the Torah was given at Sinai to so many millions of people, because each person who was at Sinai, who prophesied in the wake state, passed it on to his child, and his child to his child, and that's the Morosha Kilas Yaakov. Each one passed it on to his child. So although we live thousands of years beyond Sinai, doesn't make a difference. There's this unbroken chain from Sinai and Mesorah that's how we know that the Torah is the Dvar Hashem, is the word of Hashem, both Torah Shebechsav, Torah Sheba'peh. That's the Mesorah. Now, Rameir Simcha over there in Parshas Goshen, there's a mitzvah say, positive command, Ish imo vivo p'tiro, shabsosai tishmoru. Ish imo v'oviv tiro. You have an obligation to revere your mother and your father. What's reverence? Reverence is not kibud. It's kabed yosov yichov esimecha. That's the 10 Commandments. That's Aseres HaDibros. The mitzvah in Kedoshim is tiro. What's yiro? Yiro is reverence. You revere your parents. The way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the infrastructure of a family, parent, child to parent, is a mitzvah of kibud. That's to feed the parent, to assist the parent in the physical. Reverence is you value parent in a special context. You're revering the parent is special. You're not permitted to sit in your parent's seat. You're not permitted to interrupt the conversation. You're not permitted to speak in a way where you're contradicting the parent. It has to be said in a very specific way. Otherwise, it's a lack of reverence. If you have the relationship is reverence to the parent, when the parent teaches you something, you value it differently than a stranger teaches you something. So when your father teaches you about Shabbos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the creator of the world. And Rashi says in Chulin that if a Jew is Mechalo Shabbos, he's considered Mumel Torah Kula. You consider an apostate as if you reject the whole Torah in its entirety. Why? So Rashi says, because what is Shabbos? When we keep the Shabbos, what is? It's a testament that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the creator of the world. If you don't keep the Shabbos, we're talking about deliberate, that means it's irrelevant to you. It's irrelevant. If it's irrelevant, that means any mitzvah you do doesn't have that meaning any longer. Because if Hashem, because that is the core of everything, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the Borei Olam He created the world for a reason. He created the world that everything that exists is based on that objective. Therefore, you're Mumel Chol Torah Kula. If you actually, you Mechal Shabbos deliberately, okay? Now, but how do you know Hashem is the creator? Because if you have tiro, if you have that reverence for your mother and your father, then there's as Shabsosa Tishmoru. Therefore, when your parents share something with you, it has a different value than a stranger on the street communicates it to you. It's a whole different reality. So the structure where HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the infrastructure of the family, this kibbud avim and this yira, this reverence, that's the guarantee that the Masorah should be able to be passed on from generation to generation. Because if there's no reverence, it's irrelevant what your parent tells you. Your parent is no different than any stranger on the street, especially if it infringes on your freedoms. It's irrelevant. But if you have the reverence and you value what your parent tells you, then you take it seriously. So that is to guarantee the transmission, the perpetuation of the Masorah. That's Ramesh Simcha of Dvinsk. So it's Morosha. What is the obligation of every Jew when we have Torah? It's Morosha. It's to what? It's to pass it on, to study it well enough and to communicate it to the child, that the child should value it sufficiently that he should want to pass it on to the next generation. Or to create an educational system that, the Gemara tells us in Bava Basra that there was a Kohen Gadol. It was during Bai Sheni, his name was Rabbi Shua ben Gamlo. Rabbi Shua ben Gamlo, although it was during the Roman era, where the way you would become the Kohen Gadol, he had to pay for it. He had to buy it from the Roman governor. He was a tzaddik. His wife, her name was Marsa. He married a very wealthy woman, and she had the ability, she bought the position from the Roman governor. Her husband should be the Kohen Gadol. And he survived Yom Kippur. So it says, there's a person, Zocha Osa Ish L'Teiv, that person should be remembered always for good. Rabbi Shua ben Gamlo Shno. His name was Yeshua. What did he do? He created an educational system, a Torah educational system. The whole infrastructure for young people, the whole concept of the cheder, that he said every community has to have a yeshiva katana or a elementary school. And and if the town doesn't have an elementary school, this town should be put in chayrim. There's a question in the Gemara what chayrim means. Does it mean spiritual excommunication, or does it mean raised? It should be nechrav. Additionally, each class should not have more than 20 students. You have one Rebbe for 20 students. If you have more than 20 students, you have to have a teacher's aide, a Rebbe, an aide, assisting the Rebbe to deal with the Talmidim. Once you reach 40, the class has to be divided. All the particulars of Torah education, he created. And the Gemara says that the reason why he created it was because there were many people, as a result of the wars, there were many children that were Yisomim. They were orphans. The mitzvah is what? a father has to teach his son Torah. They had no fathers. So what happens to these children? As a result of that, he created this educational system that the system would be the equivalent of the father teaching him Torah, to guarantee the perpetuation of Torah. That's Zoch, it says, Imoli, Shuman Gamlo, Hoyin Torah. Hear this? The Torah would have been forgotten. Reb Shuman Gamlo wouldn't have set up this educational system. Therefore, Zochos Ish Tov. Therefore, this person, he deserves to be remembered always for good, because if not for him, Hoyin Torah. So I once asked the question, I mean, he created this system because they were Selmim. They were orphans. I mean, were the majority of Klaus orphans? Probably not. So if the majority were not orphans, you'd say Torah would have forgotten from this minority of children. But the vast majority had parents. So what does it say? Ilmoli Yushumen Gamlo Yishtakach Torah. How do we understand it? So the way I understood it was that whoever succeeds in Torah, everything is based on Siyata D'Shmaya. You need special divine assistance with all the influences of the world. So if that's the case, if you're worried about somebody else's child who doesn't have a father and you consider for his Torah, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is concerned for your child's Torah. That's Ilmole Yishumagahi Nishtach Torah B'Yisrael. If he wouldn't have attended to the needs of all these children who had no parents to teach Torah to them, these parents, although the children had parents, they wouldn't have merited the Siyata D'Shmaya that the Torah they would teach their children would be effective sufficiently. So because they were concerned for the other children who did not have parents, therefore they merited that their Torah would be effective to their own children. That's the way I explained it to Bava Basra. Okay? But again, what is it? What did Reb Shmuel Gamliel do? He guaranteed till the end of time that this Torah by Klal Yisrael is only because there's an educational system. I mean, parents, when you send your child to yeshiva, to elementary school, the Rebbe is a surrogate. That's all. He's a shliach. The Rambam Paskins in Hilchos Talmud Torah that if his parent can't teach Torah to the child, and a Rebbe teaches, the Rebbe is the surrogate of the father. He's like the agent. So again, the father fulfills his mitzvah of Talmud Torah through the Rebbe who teaches him in school. You pay tuition, whatever it is, or you guarantee your child is in yeshiva, elementary school, whatever it is, at elementary education. But it's Morosha. Morosha means what Shmuel Gamliel did. He guaranteed the perpetuation, the eternity of Torah. Because if not for that, it says Hoya Mishtakach Torah Yisrael. Torah would have been forgotten. Therefore, Socho Sedish L'Tov, that Reb Shmuel Gamliel should be remembered forever for good because of what he created, the schus that there's Torah regarding Klal Yisrael. Beno Bachya, in every parsha, he introduces the parsha with a pasuk from Mishlei. Every parsha. So the parsha is Vayechi, and then he goes to the Medrash, then he leads into the parsha. We know that Vayechi is parsha Stuma. It's a sealed parsha in terms of its paragraph structure. Why? So Rashi cites the Chazal because Yaakov wanted to be Megalah the Ketz. He wanted to reveal when Mashiach would come, and it was Nistam Imenu, and it was concealed. The question, what does it mean? Was it he wasn't able, HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused him not to be able to, or does it mean intentionally he did not? So Rabbeinu Bachio cites a medrash, which in the footnote in that edition for Moshe Rav Kook, it says they never located the medrash that Rabbeinu Bachaya brings. This is medrash, but this is the medrash that initially Yaakov Avinu wanted to be Megalah the Ketz to his children, and then he hesitated. Why? Because he was concerned they weren't worthy. Why weren't they worthy? Because maybe somehow they were soiled with sin. Maybe there was chet among his children. Then he realized among all the names of his children, the letter ches tes doesn't appear. Yeah. Ches tes, which spells chet, is not among his children's names. Okay? So he felt they're worthy. He should reveal the Megalah the Ketz, who revealed the Ketz when Mashiach is coming. Then he realized, no. But there are another two letters that are not among his children's names, which indicates he should not share it with them. What are the two letters that are not? Kuf Tzadi. Kuf Tzadi, which spells Ketz, is not among his children's names. So he withheld it. He was not Megala the Ketz. So I asked the basic question. I asked the question, first, till today, Mashiach still hasn't come. What's this whole idea of Megala the Ketz, not Megala the Ketz? I mean, we're still waiting, right? Right? Waiting for him to come. He hasn't come. If Yaakov would have been Megala the Ketz 3,700 years ago, it would have made a difference. What difference would have been made? So they knew when he's coming, they didn't know when he was coming. What relevance does it have to the generations? How do we understand it? And if they had chet, they weren't qualified. Then he realized they didn't have chet, now they are qualified. But then he realized, Kuf Tzadi, no, if ketz is not among the letters, that clearly means that the will of Hashem it should not be shared. What is this all about? So I thought it had to do with Morasha Kilas Yaakov. Why? We have an obligation to guarantee the perpetuation of Torah as much as we can into the future generation. That's Morosha. It's not something we receive for ourselves. We receive to pass on, and we have to do whatever we can to guarantee when it's passed on in the most effective, secure way, with its level of authenticity, with its quality. That's our obligation. Now, the Shvatim, the Shiftei Kol, weren't simple people. Besides being Nevi'im and everything else, they had a capacity, they had a level of foresight. They could see many things into the future which we can't see, just because of the dimension of person. So if they would know when the Ketz is, whenever he's coming, they would innovate certain innovations in terms of the Masorah Torah to guarantee that we shouldn't get waylaid on the way, that all the impediments that are possible to happen, they'll create the fences, the siogim that are necessary to guarantee that it shouldn't offset Torah. It should go on that straight path. But Yaakov was concerned, but if they have ches, if the chet, the vision is not 100, it's not clear. A person has a conflict of interest. You don't see things clear. The lens is a distorted lens. Sifet, if this ches can't share it with them. Because whatever innovations they're making, you're slightly off. You know, you're at crossroads, you're slightly off, you travel 1,000 miles, who knows where you end up. So therefore we felt, if that's the case, to reveal the ketz, and the only value is only for the future generations. If that's the case, if they're tainted, their vision is anyway obscured or distorted, it'll be disastrous. Because whatever their innovations are going to be, it's not going to be correct. He felt, then he realized, no, Chestes is not there. So they have that clarity of vision. So if they have that clarity of vision, he should share it with them. They have that ability to perpetuate and guarantee the eternity of Torah in the most accurate, precise way. But then he realized Kuf Tzadi is not among the names. That the Rotzna Hashem that's not the approach to Masorah Torah. Everything has to be within your own capacity. You shouldn't have this extra external knowledge when it is based on your own endowment of gift and your own spirituality, which you create within yourself. Based on that clarity, that's how you innovate these things to guarantee the Morosha. Because if it would have been that the Ratzon Hashem is they should know when it is, so Kuf Tzadi would be with what's his name would be among their names. And since Ketz is not there, that's an indication min Hashemayim from Hashem. It should not be shared, and based on their own capacity, they make all the decisions based on the degree of foresight into the future. That's how I explained this Chazal and the value of being Megal and Ketz. We relate. What is the meaning of the word Torah? Torah. The Torah is called Torah. What is Torah? Torah is Chochmas Hashem. It's God's wisdom, right? Torah Hashem Tamima, David says. It's perfect. But what is Torah? Torah, he says, the Maral Prague says, comes from the word to be Moreh Derech. It gives us direction. Horah, what's Horah? Person is a Bal Horah. he has a capacity, he could give halakhic rulings to teach you exactly how to live your life. It's guidance. The Torah is a guidebook. That's what it is. Now, there's a famous question which is asked. Rashi brings for Rabbi Yitzchak this question: what does Torah begin with? Creation. Should start with the mitzvah HaChodesh Zelochem Rosh Chodoshin. First mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael was Kiddush HaChodesh. So why does it start with the history of the world and all what happened prior to that? So Rashi cites the Chazal, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately will destroy the nations and give them back and forth. So people shouldn't come with, say, the Klal Yisrael were interlopers, that we destroyed nations to take the land. No, it's Hashem's the creator, and it's for Hashem to give and to take, and that's where we have the right to Eretz Yisrael. That's the answer. Quotes the pasuk in Tehillim. Now, what's the basis for the question? So the Maral explains the basic question is, if Torah itself are mitzvahs, the objective, the Torah is not a history book. So if it's not a history book, what do we talk about creation? We'll talk about the Avos HaKadoshim, all the various personalities in Sefer Bereshis. What relevance does that have if it's a narrative of halacha, how we have to live our lives as Jews? And Shtaf al Chodesh Rosh Chodoshim. That's how the Maral of Prague explains the kasha. So what do we need? The first Sefer Bereshis. That he says, what Chazal answer. But again, what is Torah? Torah is Moreh Derech. So the answer is that even Bereshis is part of the Moreh Derech. To give us an understand why we have a right there. Where do we come from? That's part of the Moreh Derech. Why would we have a schus for Kabbalah Torah? Because we come from the Avos HaKadoshim. We have certain Zochach has the Avos. We have the schus Avos. We have certain inborn characteristics. Rachmanim, Vaishon, Gomli, Chasod. Where does that come from? That comes from the Avos HaKadoshim. This didn't happen in a vacuum. That's Torah. Torah is to guide us. It's not just a book of intellectualism. There's nothing as profound, deep, and broad as Torah. It's infinite. Of course, it's Chachmas Hashem, but that's not what it's all about. It's Torah Tziva. It's Moreh Derech. It's a guidebook. But it's a guidebook more than that, just to know how to do it. The mitzvahs themselves directly corresponds to every aspect of our neshama. It spiritualizes us. This is Barasi Yitzhak Torah Tavlin. It's the antidote. If not for the Torah, you'd have no control over your life, because the physicality would totally overtake us. Why are we able to spiritualize ourselves? That the neshama develops, and that becomes the dominant component of our lives. Torah Tziv Lana Moshe, Moshe Akilas Yaakov. It's all tied into this puzzle. It can't be a guidebook. Could you give a person a guidebook? You can teach him how to be an expert marksman where the man is blind, or he has his vision's impaired. You can't. So, Torah, we're impaired because the chet of Adam Rishon. How do you deal with it? The answer is Barasi Torah Tavlin. The Torah is the Tavlin, and the Chofetz Chaim cites always the Rav Chaim Vital that every mitzvah saseh corresponds to a component of our neshama. The Ramach mitzvah saseh, it's 248 components chalokim to the neshama, and every mitzvah we do, we infuse that component with spirituality, and qualitatively you do it l'shma. Whatever level you do it, that's the effect of the spiritualization of the neshama. That's the Torah tablet. So that's Torah. It's a guide. Otherwise, it's guiding. It's the blind leading the blind. It's not. And that's what Gedolei Yisrael called Eini Ha'am. They're the eyes of the people. Of course, in spiritualization and Torah knowledge, they are way on top. They are the Eini Ha'am. Because their eyes see, they could guide us. That it's a true guidebook, but they have to guide us how to use this almanac or this guidebook, how to live our lives.